Okay. If you're perceptive, you're saying you wore that same shirt last time, and you're right. I'm doing two in one day. I'm trying to get a little bit ahead of the curve because on the 26th of September, Debbie and I fly out. We go to Atlanta first, and then from Atlanta to Amsterdam, and then Amsterdam to Berlin, where we'll be until October 1st, and then down south to Prague. We're doing our open door library work, which we dearly love. We love our friends in the ministry at Open Door Libraries, and we love being able to give them care. But this will be our first trip in a year and a half, and we've missed being in our friends' digs at the libraries with our directors, and it will be a joy and a pleasure to be there with them. The travel, maybe not so much. I don't do really well with masks, and but I'm going to trust God's grace, and I think we're going to have a good trip. But anyway, there's going to be about 3 or 4 days where I don't know exactly what my situation is going to be and what kind of time, all kinds of things that might mean it'd be great to have a few of these done ahead. And so that's what I'm doing. I kept, the last time I did a miniature, believe it or not, a miniature download of my theology of the church as God's family and what that means for the role of the leadership of the church. In 1 Timothy 3, Paul writes, and the New International Version that I'm working from uses the term overseer. The King James Version calls it a bishop. Other versions just simply call it a church leader. I believe he's talking to elders and about elders. And I shared that in a healthy family, the oldest siblings will take the responsibility for the care of the family in the absence of the parents. Now, we live in an age where that's not normal. It wouldn't very normally happen, and I suppose for a couple hundred years, even in America, that was not a normal event. But it did happen more often in previous generations, where the parents would not be physically present, and the older siblings would then take responsibility for caring for and leading the family. In God's family, the church, an elder has to be of a maturity and character that they can be trusted to care well for his family. And that's what Paul goes on to write about. He doesn't give a job description of here is what every elder does, but here is what every elder must be. And he says it this way in verse 2. Now, the overseer is to be above reproach, faithful to his wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not given to drunkenness, not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. And he goes on from there, but that's a mouthful. Let's look at it. An overseer is to be above reproach. You know what reproach is. Reproach essentially is there is reason for us to doubt your character. There's reason for us to wonder how honest you are. If that, a reproach would be an accusation. For a person to be above reproach, think about that. A person's character would be so clean, if an accusation were made, it wouldn't be believed because their life had reflected a moral consistency so that that accusation would simply not make sense. To be above reproach doesn't happen accidentally. In our world, you think about this, in our world of social media and instant communications, living above reproach has to be done more intentionally, I think, than almost ever before. Because even what you think is your private life may not be as private as you think it is. I know this because it's true of me. I've admitted to you, I have real strong political biases, and social media is a real convenient venue for me to express my political biases. I have to be careful. How I say what I say is sometimes equally as weighted as what I say. And I have learned, and believe it or not, if you follow me on social media, you know I still post up stuff, but I've learned I have to be much more careful about how I present what I say. I've learned that people my age, in my demographic, tend to be a little bit less easily offendable by some of my political statements and values and beliefs. But younger people, and I don't think it's their problem. I think this has to be my concern. If I want to be above reproach, I've got to live above reproach. And I take that to mean what I believe my values are, what I think my morality is, has to be evident in how I live. I wonder how many, at first I thought, when I first think about this, I'm thinking, there aren't very many politicians that are really above reproach. And some of that has to do with, I don't care, this is not one party or the other. There are people in our, political system I can't put in the category of above reproach. There are some. And those I have a very high level of admiration for. Then I thought, and I know I'm throwing rocks, but there are pastors and preachers who I don't think I can say they're above reproach. Since I'm throwing rocks, I'll just say I had such a high regard for Ravi Zacharias. I watched his videos and I read his books, and here was a man who could defend the value and validity of the Bible and of biblical thought and worldview. I was so grateful for how well he could, and without being mean-spirited or caustic, could debate atheists and others who wanted to attack the Christian faith. But then, after his death, we discovered he wasn't quite above reproach. And that, to me, was heartbreaking. That he had thrown away his integrity by moral choices that he had made. He's not the only one. I have to guard my own heart to live above reproach. And that takes intentionality and partnership with the Holy Spirit and His guidance. If if anyone, and Paul sets this in a masculine gender, so that if a man is going to lead God's family, first on the list, above reproach, his character must be morally above reproach, which is reflected in his behavior. You see, your character doesn't stand on its own. You can tell me about your character. You can tell me about your values. But you know how I know what your values are? It's by what I see of how you live. It's a real similar thing. I've told you this before. When people tell me these are my values, occasionally in counseling, because a lot of what the counseling I do is all the counseling I do is values-based because it's biblical counseling. And sometimes they'll tell me what their values are, but I tell them. And sometimes it's an empty threat, but it's enough because here's the thing. If you show me this year's calendar and you let me look at your bank statements for this year, I'll be able to tell you what your values are, where you spend your time, and where you spend your money, and how you spend your time and how you spend your money they speak loudly of what your actual values are. And the leaders of God's family have to live their lives in such a way that they are above reproach. Is this so that God will give them the nod? No. It's because God has poured out His grace on them. And living above reproach it's the result of God's grace. Is there any Christian, is there any follower of Jesus who shouldn't be intentional about living above reproach? I don't think so. It's so essential that the leadership, those who are in designated positions of leadership and authority in God's family, lead the way by the purity of their life, by living above reproach. And then he says, faithful to his wife. In the New International Version, other versions even say the wife of but one, the husband of but one wife. Some people have said it could also be translated, they are a one-woman man. What's the point? Must an overseer be married? Some people believe so. I don't think so. I do see that if an overseer, one who desires to be an overseer, is married, then he's got to be faithful to his wife. Why? Because if he's a follower of Jesus, he will be faithful to his wife. But again, I think this requires intention. Now, there are levels to read into this faithfulness, okay? Obviously, he does not step outside his marriage. This is against marital infidelity. But there's another aspect of the faithfulness of one who desires to be an elder or an overseer. Have you ever seen a man, a husband, talk down to and about his wife? I don't see that as faithful. I know that Debbie has many opportunities where she could talk down to and about me. And when I was immature and young, I probably tried to make jokes about the wife. I don't anymore. And if you ever hear me making a joke where I disparage her, you call me on it, because I want to faithfully love and serve her, because she is my one and only. There's more to say about all of this, but I've already used up the time. So when I come back to it next time, we'll pick it up here on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.